All right, we are live. Happy Wednesday. We are here. This is the Patreon Club's, the Breath Club, the monthly live, where I answer questions of select members. I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you if you're in the Breath Club. This is a tribe that started as of next month. We are going to be 5 years old. Like, we're going to kindergarten, guys. This is this is some big stuff. So right now in the Breath Club, we are doing so this month, last month we had a heart rate variability challenge where every single day everyone was challenged to do 2 10-minute sessions of a very unique language of breath style heart rate variability session. Hopefully boosted that heart rate variability up there. This month we're focusing on longer sessions. So these are sessions that I have been using and practicing and sharing with the tribe for years. And these are mixed technique sessions. So what we do is it's kind of a scientific thing. We mix different techniques together, and we have longer sessions. Of course, the music is beautiful. The audio is curated and polished and just overall really awesome. So this month we had 2 long sessions. I try to let it vary in this tribe. Like, there's over 100 sessions at this point, right? So we've got there are different little folders with the longer sessions, or is it a psychedelic session, or is this a athletic session, or is it a session dedicated to better sleep? Is this for ramping you up or for chilling you out? Is it 5 minutes or less, right? So there's a little bit of something for everybody in the tribe. And today is a big day in the tribe. Every month we have one of these. So every month we do a session where I answer questions from the tribe. And then after this, we do a group breathwork session on Zoom. These are sessions that never make it out into the public. They are sessions that I'll use music that I don't have always the licenses to. Don't tell everybody, but it's just for the tribe. This is just a group of people from around the world. We got people in every continent on the globe. And well, maybe except for Antarctica, maybe, but we have people from all over the world who are all about feeling better and being healthier. This breath work is not just psychedelic, right? So there's a lot of groups out there. There's a lot of breath work, like Patreon groups or breath clubs that are just about that. And that's awesome. We are more about breathwork education. There's tiers where you get tips and really some deep dives into certain topics every month. At one tier, you get to have a session with me every month. So there's something in there for everybody, but it's only $5 to join at the base tier. And that gets you access to everything all of the breath recordings, all of the sessions, gets you access to our party that we're about to have. So today we're going to be talking about, we've got, I had 4 questions. Two of them sort of roll into the CO2 tolerance thing. And this is something that's sort of been a topic of discussion lately. So I think I'll just sort of, I'll weigh in on it. I have been, this is one of those topics where it's one of those topics where the science is emerging and I'm not sure exactly what it's saying. There are implications. There are people that I respect who have weighed in with very heavy opinions one way or the other. But we'll talk about it, because one of the things on this particular session, right? So people can ask me specific questions, or they can just ask me to talk about a topic for a little bit, right? So today we're going to be talking about the topic of CO2 tolerance. Is it a thing? We're going to talk about the origins of the Wim Hof method breathing. So this is something that I've talked to people about, and there's a lot more discussion about it in the past few years. This is something that I have a lot of experience with. I trained with Wim Hof directly. I worked with that organization for quite some time. Many of you are fans of the channel just because of my work with Wim Hof. This is something I was deeply steeped in, the Wim Hof, I guess, methodology or the thinking. And so it's something that occasionally I do get questions on. Today Scott asked me a question about it. We're going to get to that in just a minute, Scott. First, I do want to just to cover a few things. We are taking applications for the Language of Breath Breathworker School. This is the most in-depth breathwork certification you can get, along with a in-person epic adventure. We're going to the mountains of Bryan Head, Utah for our in-person capstone. So not only are you getting world-class training in all of the different modalities, all the principles, the foundational principles, you're learning about why breathwork is really only half of the equation. Breathing really is only half of the equation when it comes to breathwork. Most people are missing out on half of what's really at play here. We learn this for ourselves, and then I teach you how to teach other people. We are taking applications, but the deadline is coming up soon. It is March 15th for the deadline for the Language of Breath Breathworker School. If you go to jessecoomer.com, you can apply there, or you can go to languageofbreathcollective.com. Either one, you can apply, and you can even schedule a time to meet up with me if it's something you have questions about. I try to make sure it's a good match. I don't want you to sign up for this training if it's something you're really looking for, something that we're not offering. I don't want that. You don't want that. So if that's something you want to discuss, definitely reach out. Last but not least on the announcements, this is my family's new book. It's called Moo, A Cow's Practical Guide to Chilling Out. And it is a breathwork book. It teaches a very powerful technique for kiddos. It's not something that is just trying to overload them. That's one of the things, actually, one of the reasons why we decided to write the book. It was because there are books out there that are focused on breathwork, and there are some really good ones out there too. Language of Breath faculty Ryan Bean. If you go to his website, I think he wrote a couple books for kids, and they're fantastic. But most books out there try to teach too many things. And so what we decided to do, and this is at my family, and if you if you get the book, there is a website at the back, and it will take you to a read along where my son is the narrator, and actually you may hear my voice as one of the cows in the story. It's one of those stories that's awesome for kids, but it's also cool to read as an adult too. You know, those Pixar movies now and all the kids movies that are actually a lot of fun to watch with your kids. This is one of those books. We wanted to make sure it was fun for adults. So actually, I think our biggest demographic is adults that are like, I just want to read it, and it's really cool. So it's on sale now. If you go to jessecoomer.com, you can go to jessecoomer.com/books, and it goes straight there, or you can just go to Amazon. Anyway, let's get into these. Hey, Dana, happy Wednesday. Harris, do I do zone 2 cardio? Yes, I do. All right. Now that we've gotten that, there's one question done. But let's get into this. So the first question is from Rye, and it's a pretty simple question. So I'm just going to answer it first because these other questions I want to spend a little bit more time on. He says, basically he reached out to me. He's like, I know you've done some talks about protein farts. So one of the things I like to go to the gym. I like to lift weights. So instead, and I've done a lot of yoga in my day, and I've done a lot of those types of forms of exercise, but what I enjoy the most is weightlifting. So I like doing deadlift. I like doing squats. I like doing bench press. And so one of the things that in the sort of like the gym culture is protein farts. So pardon the expression, but why is it I get so much gas whenever I am trying to feed myself, protein, whether it's, in this case, he just said protein farts, but whether it's plant source or human, or like not human source, whether it's plant source or animal source or wherever you're getting it from, it is a common question that I get. And so this is actually the first publication that I ever was involved with. The first publication I ever had was with it was a weight training. It was like this muscle building website called T Nation. So Testosterone Nation. But basically my big thing was, what happens is so many times athletes or just people who are wanting to get the most out of their exercise, they'll work out and then they'll instantly slug down their protein shake or like a post-workout meal. And they'll wonder, why am I having all of this upset stomach? Why am I having all this gas and diarrhea and all these things? And it's a pretty simple answer. One of the things that we don't always think about is when you're in an active state, your autonomic nervous system is activated in the more sympathetic side. This can be when you're stressed. This can be when you're excited. This can be when you're exercising. It really, there's basically any time your nervous system is trying to give you energy to do actions, that's what's happening. You're getting this, you're getting a shift in your nervous system. And what that does is it will shift your blood flow. It makes major changes in your physiology. And as a result, in this case, it's going to start to shut down your digestive organs. And so your digestion will be suboptimal in favor of powering your muscles. And so therefore, we tend to see a lot of upset stomach, diarrhea, gas, etc. And so something to think about if this is something you're suffering from is, what is my post-workout strategy? How am I going to go from being at, a 10 out of 10, I am going 100%, because that's how you roll, right? That's how you're not the kind of guy that goes to the gym and just phones it in. You are the gym master. You go in there, you lift all the weights, right? but basically, how do I go in there and how do I down regulate? What is my strategy? Now, in my book, actually, let's see here. This one, this one here. This is a practical guide to breathwork. If you're watching this right now, let's see. Do I have a copy? I don't have. So in that book, I have a complete protocol on how to down regulate. And you want to dedicate some time after every gym experience, if you can, to down regulation. Even if all it is doing box breathing as you drive home, doing something is better than nothing. And this is something that I see ignored all too often by athletes and fitness and wellness enthusiasts. So that is the quick one, Rye. Thank you so much for that question. We get to start with fart. We get to start with talking about farts. Let's see here. The origins of the Wim Hof breathing technique. So Scott asked about this. This is one of those things you may have come to breathwork like I did through Wim Hof. But here's the thing. I started because I was trying to meditate, and I found that it was very difficult. I found it very challenging. And so I started going to yoga class. I started looking into yogic breathing techniques, also known as pranayama. And, I learned box breathing. I learned alternate nostril and some of those things. They were kind of boring to me at the time. I was just kind of like, okay, I guess this is, and let's be honest, these things actually are amazing, right? I would say these are the most underrated things, right? The things that actually move the needle the most they tend to be the more subtle practices. And later on, okay, so that was like 12, 13 years ago when I got into this. Later on, I found out they teach you these things first, and then they gently and progressively add more knowledge to the student until you get to more active, more maybe what we might consider to be more impactful, like in the moment, breathing techniques. These might be Bhastrika Kumbhaka pranayama, which is what we're going to be talking about today. It might be Kapalabhati, it might be Kundalini. There's a lot of different things that you can get into as you continue down the path of pranayama. But I was a rookie. I was just looking at the stuff that was available. And so I'm just like, okay. So then one day I was on YouTube and I saw, and this was before Joe Rogan. This was before the Vice documentary. This is before all that stuff. I'm not trying to say I'm a hipster, but I think the only reason why I got into following Wim Hof originally was because I saw a interview that he did. And this is back this is before Crazy Uncle Wim. Like that's sort of I wouldn't say it's a new character because it's been around for quite some time, but I didn't enter into um, kind of his sphere because of that. I entered into it because I had heard about this Radboud study, and there was all these implications, like you'd never catch a cold again. And I was experimenting. I was open to a lot of things. I I was just trying to be open to, okay, what's possible. And here's this guy, he's breaking these records, and I thought, okay. So I stopped looking into pranayama at that point, and I started looking into Wim Hof and Wim Hof method and that sort of thing. They just came out with their very first online course, so I took that, and man, I was like, man, I really feel something, right? And if you've ever done, so sadly enough, what happens now is just the word Wim Hof has sort of just become synonymous with hyperventilation breathing styles, right? Okay, so there's this. So or do you do Wim Hof stuff, or do you do this, right? But at the time, it wasn't like that. It was like, okay, now this is whenever I also noticed Wim Hof was really into yoga, right? There's all these in his, even in the free, like the free 3-day course or whatever. He's at his place. There's all these chakra things in the background. Like clearly the man had done an enormous amount of yoga. He was doing the splits. He was doing all these yoga moves. He would do the crane. And I was like, well, I wonder if, I guess maybe he got some of this from pranayama, but I don't remember it from my pranayama, the stuff that I had looked into. And so eventually it just came down to a lot of people asking, hey, where'd you come up with this? And he made the claim, and he still makes the claim as far as I know. If you go to his website, last time, it's been a little while since I went to the website, but there's a like, hey, where'd this come from? I got it from nature. I did not get it from the books, right? It was this whole thing where I learned it from, I got into the cold, and I just sort of invented it. I sort of just came up with it out of nowhere. And so I believe that. And I trained with him. I was in the first group of people to train with him. It was exciting, and he's a nice guy, and it was just this epic thing. At the time, he was making the claim that you could send healing energy from like if you thought about a place and then you held your breath and you thought about that place, you could send healing energy to that place, which I kept trying so hard. At the time, I had torn both knees. I had torn both of my meniscuses, my left and my right. And I was just like, hey man, this guy, he knows his stuff, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. Never worked. Okay. So now I never had to get surgery on my meniscuses, and I don't have any pain. We can talk about the things that I've done and that I continue to do to live a pain-free life with 2 torn meniscuses. Now I don't do a lot of, I do zone 2 cardio a lot. I don't do a lot of impact sports, but we'll talk about that on another time if you want to. But over that time, I started to just nerd out, and I started to think about, okay, what are the other, I want to think about all this other breath. And about that time when I trained with Wim Hof, Patrick McEwen came out with his Oxygen Advantage book, which was, and the nice thing is Patrick McEwen never claimed that he invented anything. He's like, yeah, I trained with this Buteyko guy, and I adjusted it, and I sort of brought it to the more modern understanding. We've got a better understanding of the human organism now than Buteyko did. Here is the update, is kind of what he would say in his Oxygen Advantage book. So I started researching that. I did the Buteyko certification, and I started to just say, well, I'm just going to learn everybody. I'm just going to do this thing and just learn as much as I can. And Power 44 wants to know a little bit about Vivation. Maybe I'll get into that today as well. I have to answer the questions of the people in the Breath Club. That is the purpose of this, but I appreciate that question. Maybe I'll be able to get to that later. Anyway, so years went by. I keep training people. I'm a Wim Hof instructor, but I'm also instructing in these other techniques. And I went back to pranayama, and I discovered Bhastrika Kumbhaka pranayama, and I'm like, man, this is a lot like Wim Hof, but it can't be, because I know he told me he he went into the water, and then that's how he was. It was like this. It was almost this magical thing where, there's this all sort of a mystical vibe around it. And I was like, well, it can't be that, he took it from this, because he would have said so, right? He never says so. Like, he's always claiming, he invented it himself. And so, I started going around, and I trained with, I learned Sudarshan Kriya, and I learned Vivation, and I learned all these different techniques and all these different modalities, and almost all of them, but not all of them, would say, especially what I would consider first and second generation breath work, right? So first generation breath work, I'm not talking about like the ancient stuff. I'm talking about the people that actually use the term in English breath work. So like rebirthing, holotropic, all those early ones, and like Sudarshan Kriya and a lot of these others. A lot of times they wanted to say, if you breathe this way, I figured out the right sequence of breathing. And if you do it this way, it's the best, right? And while a lot of times they would give some credit to other traditions or anything like that, they wanted to sort of claim it themselves. And I started to think about this, and I was like, okay, the reality is that we know that Wim Hof was like super into yoga. We know that he did like the time, he was in like India, and he's done a lot of stuff in the yogic world. There's that, right? We also, something also I later on learned is that the Dutch and a lot of Europe was really into rebirthing, more so than the United States. Really into rebirthing, really into psychedelic breath work, right? And so it's like, okay, so it's pretty obvious what happened here. Now, in Bhastrika Kumbhaka Pranayama, I want to make it clear, when it comes to yogic breathing, one of the things in the modern world we think, well, it's this number of breaths, this is how hard, this is the exact amount of air you take in. We get really down what we would consider to be granular. We take things to a very granular level because we want all the details and we want to know exactly how it's done. The ancient yogis weren't like that, right? So if you look at the descriptions of Bhastrika Kumbhaka Pranayama or any of these things, they're pretty general. They're kind of vague. And so ultimately what you have is over breathing, and then kumbhakas, there's different kinds of kumbhakas. There's a neutral lung kumbhaka, there's a full lung, there's empty lung. And so what you have here is when you combine over breathing with an apnea, so kumbhaka is roughly what that is. What you have there is Bhastrika Kumbhaka Pranayama. It's a form of pranayama. Now, there's no way that Wim Hof didn't hear about this, right? Like, and just think, what is more plausible? So you might have heard of Occam's razor, right? So the most likely explanation is probably the explanation. What is more likely, right? We had a guy that goes into cold water, hyperventilates, and says, you know what we should do? We should breathe in and out, full breaths, then hold until you can't hold anymore, and then hold your breath with full lungs, and then repeat that 3 to 5 times. Or what probably happened is he learned Bhastrika Kumbhaka Pranayama. He probably went to some rebirthing sessions. So Bhastrika Pranayama is primarily through the nose. Okay. So like the Bhastrika, all the Bhastrika, it's so funny. I've learned Bhastrika so many different ways from so many different people. And it's funny. It's because, no, this is how it's done. No, this is how it's done. But it's generally, I've never done it with just the mouth. So it's usually through the nose only. And in yogic traditions, and even in the early days of rebirthing, you would go in and out through the nose or in and out through the mouth with rebirthing and beyond. But that was because it completed the circuit. Then nowadays you hear a lot of in through the nose, out through the mouth, which the old school breath workers they don't really like. And honestly, I did that for a long time because in through the nose is nice because, okay, you're using your nasal passages, you're activating your diaphragm. There's a lot of plus to inhaling through the nose. It also slows down the inhale, slows down your breathing. You're less likely to get carried away. Out through the mouth was nice for me because I have a eustachian tube that is a little too small. And I could sometimes get my ear kind of clogged up if I did it too hard in and out through the nose. That was before I learned how to train my sinuses. Okay. So my clients and my students in the language of breathworker school, I teach you how to train a person's sinuses so that they can open back up. Okay. It's not just the Buteyko stuff, although Buteyko is on to a lot of stuff, and Patrick McEwen is fantastic when it comes to what he's doing with the sinus clearing exercises with Buteyko. There's a lot more that you can do, but the thing is, so it's likely that he just learned Bhastrika Kumbhaka Pranayama from a yoga teacher, and then also heard about rebirthing or holotropic breath. Went to one of those. They're almost always right through the mouth. And it was just like, well, why don't I just do Bhastrika Kumbhaka Pranayama and then add the mouth element to it, and then voila. Like if you just apply Occam's razor, the most likely explanation is probably the explanation that is more likely to have happened. And we have all the, like, there's so much evidence. It's so yoga based. There's yoga all the time. He's always doing yoga poses. It's obvious that that is his background. And so here I was, his student. I was in the organization for 7 years. I was enamored by the man. There was just this hero worship that I had for him. And I just bought it. Even though it was like, wait a minute, what about all this yoga stuff? Isn't that where you got it? No, I did not get it from the books, right? And and all this stuff. And he doubles down on it. Now, the reason why I think that is, he's not the only one to do that. There's other ones out there that double down on, no, this is my invention. I came up with it. This is mine, because it's like, okay, so I want to claim this. This is something I want to claim. Otherwise, he would just be a yoga instructor, like a pranayama instructor, right? Who is teaching you sort of maybe a variation on pranayama. But if it's like, hey, no, I came up with this. This is mine. Then it's like, okay, it's mine. I can put my name on it. Now, I don't think you have to do that. Like with language of breath, I don't do that, right? So in all of my books, and just so you know, let's see here, this book and all of the books I've ever written, I have thanked Wim Hof for being a huge impact on my life. Okay, so I don't want to come across and say, this is not me thumbing my nose at the man. This is just me answering a question of Scott here, who asked the question about where did this come from? If I had never met Wim Hof, I would not have gone into breath work. That was the thing that I needed to get me hooked on this thing. And I became incredibly curious, and, it led me down the path where I needed to go. It's just that when we make a claim, hey, I invented this, and it's kind of a spiritual thing, right? It's like, oh, the water called me and I got into it, and I noticed that I needed to breathe heavy, and I started to feel energy. And, there's this whole appeal to nature, right? Because that's one of these appeals that we say, if it's from nature, it's good. So there's all these things where it's like the appeal to nature is what we call logical fallacy. I don't know if you know me or not, but I am a recovering college professor. So I was 11 years college professor. I taught research and rhetoric. So a lot of these things, when it comes to logical fallacies and some of the biases in our thinking that sort of blind us, I was schooled in, but I still fell for, right? It's not like I was immune to it. I still went along with it, and I was enamored. And then all these claims about science, it's like, oh, just our method itself is what is the only thing that will do these things that these scientific studies are claiming that will be done. It's just not true, right? So we understand over breathing and hyperventilative breathing will do certain things. And we understand that cold training does a certain thing, right? And so there's a desire, of course, to say this thing that I came up with, which was borrowed, okay, which, we are all standing on the shoulders of giants. So it's clearly, if you just, the more you know about the topic, and this is the thing, the more you know about the topic, the more it's just very clear. Okay. So there's so much about breath, and it's not just this one sequence that's going to be the answer. So what I call generation 1 of breath work was the rebirthing, holotropic, vivation. They made a lot of claims. I mean, rebirthing made the craziest claim, right? So Leonard Orr of rebirthing, he made the claim that if you did rebirthing every day and you lived according to the elements, you would live, you would have immortality, like physical. He said physical immortality, right? I mean, that's a pretty bold. I mean, so that was a pretty bold claim. And the next, so Wim Hof and a lot of those guys, they're making some bold claims too. But it's like never catch a cold again is a far cry from you're never going to physically die, right? But it's still one of those impossible claims. And so and there's others that do the same thing, right? So like for instance, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar with Sudarshan Kriya, another amazing modality, is a variation of other pranayama, and I think he at least makes that distinction. He said, "Yeah, this is pranayama. This is my version of it." But there's I think there's 100 studies, 100 independent studies that make it sound like this one technique or this one sequence is like the cure-all. But what it's using is the same thing as Wim Hof is using, is the same thing as all these other things are using. It's just that whenever it's like, oh, but it's our, trademarked name. See, look, my thing is the thing. My thing is the best. And so that is where we are with the second generation of breathwork. The third generation of breathwork is the more holistic kind. And this is what I hope that Language of Breath is. And this is what I also see a lot of other great sources of breath education out there. And so and a lot of them that are contemporary, they don't get as much credit. They don't get as much fanfare or spotlight because we're not making these, over the top claims. And because we are relying on, we're saying a little bit more holistic of a view. It's, but I think eventually people are going to wise up. We want the clickbait. We want to believe it. We want to believe in Bigfoot. We want to believe that there's a guy who fell into water and then came up with a breathing sequence and a whole methodology. And it was all nature. It was nothing from a teacher. It was all this one person, and they were somehow almost divinely inspired or something. We like those stories, and we want those things to happen. And I was enamored by the man, and believe me, I have great memories working with him. It's just that if you want to know about the origins of the breathing technique, it really is obvious that it's Bhastrika Kumbhaka pranayama, and that it's been influenced by rebirthing. So there it is, guys. So that may have been the reason why some people were watching. I hope you don't. If you have questions about that, you can join the Breath Club, and you can always ask questions. You can reach out. Happy to talk more about it another time. Another question came from Megan, and she had heard me recently I did an interview, and there's a lot of science that's coming out on the science of CO2. Is CO2 tolerance a thing? And there are people that I respect that they're starting to say, hey, I don't even think it's a thing. And there's a lot of people I respect that are still very much like CO2 tolerance is the thing, right? And so what do we know, right? So what do we know? So one of the things that I think always causes problems is ambiguity. So ambiguity meaning that we're not really being clear on even what we're talking about. So what is CO2 tolerance anyway, right? So if it's a thing, what is it, right? So we do know that CO2, the rise of CO2 in your blood does cause you to feel breathlessness. We know that is an effect of rising CO2. And so we can say, well, all right, so your ability to be comfortable under rising levels of CO2, you could consider that to be your CO2 tolerance. Now, the thing that I think there's maybe some ambiguity around is how does that relate to your breath rate? How does that relate to whenever you take a CO2 tolerance test, right? So I use the exhale test, which was made popular by Brian McKenzie and free divers. And I do that. I used to call it specifically a CO2 tolerance test. Now I just call it the exhale test, but we are working with CO2. CO2 is an element that we're working with. It's just not maybe the only element we're working with. And so there's also the Bolt score. And so if you're really a big fan of like Buteyko, and if you're a big fan of like Oxygen Advantage, that is really focusing on CO2. And I think I think that it's important to sort of say, okay, so what are we really talking about? Well, our daily experience, right? So if you think about the breath that you're taking right now, so the breathing you're taking right now that you're thinking about it, okay, now I'm in control of it. Maybe it's a little weird now, but if you think about the pace of breathing that you're having right now, why is it that pace? Is it because you're waiting until you feel the urge to breathe? Is it because you're waiting for the feeling of breathlessness? Probably not, right? So when we talk about the effect of CO2 tolerance on our lived experience and the effect of CO2 tolerance on our regular breathing patterns, we might need to reassess what we've once believed was true. And this is stuff that we go into great depth in the Language of Breathworker School. We really sort of start to dice this up. But just to answer this question, and I appreciate Megan's question on this. So what we're dealing with here is the fact that you have a conscious and an unconscious experience. Okay, so your conscious experience is only a small fraction of what's happening in your brain. Very, very small. At all times, we're taking in about 11 million pieces of information, but we can only consciously process about 50 pieces of that information. So most of what's happening in your brain, you're not really aware of. So what happens is your brain is, so in the words of my mentor, Dr. Autumn Musick, your brain is a predictive and reactive organ. Okay. It is a predictive and reactive organ. It is most of the time predicting. So right now, your brain is predicting your energy needs as they will be in the very near future, or what we experience in the now. Okay. So what you're experiencing in the now is very interesting. So right now, you're actually experiencing a controlled hallucination. Okay. So I don't know how far I'll get on this, but it's a lot of fun to nerd out on. There are things that you expect. There's a voice that you expect me to use. You're just looking at the screen. You're expecting certain things, and there are certain things outside of that expectation, right? And it's interesting. So what we used to think, like for instance, Aristotle, who was an absolute genius for his day, but he wasn't using the materials that we have now. Aristotle explained our like vision, for instance, as what I think most people still believe it is. He described it. Okay, the light comes in, and then we process it somehow. Okay, and that is how we know where we are. In reality, the research is showing that what happens is we predict where we are, and we double check that prediction with our senses, which is really sexy. I think that's just like what a cool thing, right? You're constantly predicting what's about to happen. And the reason for that is that if you actually waited, if our organism actually waited for that processing to take place, things like catching a baseball, things like throwing a spear, catching an animal, all these things, they would not be possible because we just wouldn't have that capacity. We just can't process fast enough. So it's an incredibly clever thing that this brain is able to do this prediction. And it does that with our energy expenditure. It says, how much energy do I think I'm going to need to use? And it's going to change your rate of breath based off of that as well. And that's primarily what we see. And we start to see patterns emerge. We start to see habits emerge. We start to see mechanical issues emerge, functional or dysfunctional issues emerge. And what happens is sometimes the end result is it's this thing we can measure over here, but it's starting because of that reactive and predictive brain of ours. And so this is where, for instance, we still do the exhale test. If you're in the language breath, we still do it because it's very valuable in helping us understand where that person is in that moment. And it's great. It's a great way to have a somewhat objective measurement for progress. And it's not just measuring our ability to be comfortable with higher levels of CO2. Okay. So Is it a thing? I still will say yes, it is a thing, because there is there are different degrees of comfortability with raised levels of CO2. So, for instance, this is one of the things that we see when a person engages in physical fitness. Okay, so if you do a lot of exercise, you start to become more comfortable. Yes, you're also having these physiological changes, but you also develop a comfort level with the biological processes that come along with energy production. And there's a certain degree of comfortability that you can build simply by doing CO2 tolerance routines. Okay, so you sort of just sort of develop a comfortability. It's similar to like cold training, for instance, right? Yes, there are physiological adaptations. We call them body hardening and things like that. But at the same time, you are even with the body hardening. Anyone who's done cold training for long enough, you know that there does come, it's not like it's not cold anymore. And it's not like that physiological adaptation that you've experienced over the long periods of time doing cold training. It's not like it makes it so that it's like, oh, I don't even notice it's cold. Oh, I'm just here. Yeah, it makes it a little easier. But what you're experiencing also is you're experiencing a lot of things. But one of the things you're experiencing is that you have a higher comfortability under that feeling. That's so you've gotten to know that feeling. You're no longer afraid of it so much. There's a lot of processes that are unconscious that are happening there, but you are having sort of what we might consider to be a cold tolerance. Does it mean that does it mean you can sit out there forever? Oh, of course not. Does it mean that it's not having an effect on you? Of course not. Actually, the research on cold training shows that whether it's your first session in the cold or your 30th, you get about the same physiological response, especially when it comes to norepinephrine. So is CO2 tolerance a thing? I am for as of now, I am still saying yes, it is a thing. It's just that it's been oversimplified. It's just like so many things that we oversimplify. We oversimplify, should I breathe through my nose? Well, okay, yeah, obviously it's like flossing. I'll put it like that. Flossing is something I would guarantee everybody on this live, everybody that's ever going to watch this, you probably should floss more than you do. Okay. I'm just going to make that statement. But it's not to say that that there's no limit to how, if you floss too much, you floss too much. It's a thing I can say. But I don't know, maybe that didn't make any sense. I'm wondering I'm wondering if that made, I had a point there. I was really like, oh, this is this is great, this floss, I'm going to do the floss thing. Basically, okay, coming back to CO2 tolerance, I will say it is a thing. It's just been oversimplified, right? Okay, here it is. So if I were to say you should floss, okay, that's probably, that's good advice, but there is some nuance there. And so there's so much. Ben, hey, let today be the time whenever you decided to floss more. I'm today, that's the best part of, if today this broadcast got you to floss more, then it's a broadcast that I'm very happy to deliver. Thanks for being here, Ben. There's two Bens in the succession. So we got Ben Johnson and then Ben Vanderberg. Good to have you both here. All right. So coming back to the CO2 tolerance thing, yeah, everyone can agree flossing is good. Well, thank you. Yes. Yeah. So when it comes back to the CO2 tolerance thing, yes, it is a thing. I'm still going to side on, yes, it is a thing. It's just not as simple as we've been making it. So there's so much more to this than just what's your CO2 tolerance. So having said that, let's see here. Ben, you bet me in Indy. Well, how cool is that? So yeah, I recently moved to Chicago. I'm going to start doing some language of breath workshops up here. Ben, let's see. I was at what was it? Transformational Fitness and Wellness in Indianapolis back in my Wim Hof days. Was I okay? So tell me this, Ben. Did I have a French microbiologist with me? That's kind of it's like, wait a minute, what? Did I have a French microbiologist with me in Indianapolis, Ben, whenever I was there? Because There was sometimes I had a French microbiologist as my assistant, which I know that it shouldn't matter that he was French, but it kind of does, right? It's like somehow better. Anyway, I don't know. Was he there? No, it was another guy named. Oh, it was with James. Well, how cool. Okay, so James, yeah, he was into martial arts, and yes, how cool is that? So yeah, I used to, and I still do. I like to mentor the next generation of breath workers and things. So awesome. Okay, so having said that, just as a recap today, guys, we talked a little bit about the origins of women. Oh, actually, I was going to talk a little bit about vibration. I think Jesse content. Hey, James Going, thank you so much for that comment that you just made. Yeah, stay nasal. Nasal is, and that's another thing that's been oversimplified. We do what for the average person. I can pretty much confidently say you should breathe through your nose more, but not to everybody. And there are times when mouth breathing is totally okay. Oh, yeah. So if you want to know a bit more about that, you can train with me, or you can train with one of my breath workers, the Language of Breath, or you can become a Language of breath worker. We're taking applications now. Our application process goes till March 15th, but we do close it up whenever our class is full. So if you want to take a huge adventure, okay, so if you're in for world-class training, so we train you on all the stuff, everything I know, I teach you everything I know. And in this area, there's a lot. Maybe I don't know much about everything else, but this area. And then we go out to Bryan Head, Utah, out into the mountains, and we have like the most epic adventure. Breath work. There's like all kinds of hiking, amazing food, hands-on. So there is a difference in, for instance, well, you should know what it feels like. So, okay, so how does it feel if a person's breathing functionally? How does it feel if a person's not breathing functionally? Is there a difference between males and females? Yes, there is. How does this work ethically? How much? What can I do? Can I take people through a deep session one-on-one? We even do a photo shoot, so you can go back and you can start marketing your own services, because that's the whole point. I want you to go out and be a success. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can go to jessecoomer.com, or you can go to languageofbreathcollective.com, and you can set up a time to just talk to me. So I'm trying to take all of the discovery calls, and I've been busy. And if you go to the calendar, you're going to see that it's pretty booked up, but I do want to meet with you. If it's something, and what I want to make sure is that it's really going to get you where you want to go. So there's some people I'm just like, this is not going to be the program that's best for you. I want to make sure everybody who goes through it loves it. So far, everybody that's gone through it has loved it. A lot of them, well, they loved it so much they're like, can we do it again? But we already certified. So what do we do now? So now we have an annual reunion, because everybody loves the experience so much. So we go out and we get together every month, or every year. We also get together every month on Zoom. Speaking of getting together on Zoom, we're going to be doing that the next hour in about 10 minutes. Let's see. Power 44. If you're still there, let me know. I did a video on Vivation. I really had a great experience with Vivation. I got certified in it, and I did. I've worked with Paul Hughes. He's a nice guy. I went out and a few times. I went out to his homestead in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, or Wyoming. So we're talking the middle of nowhere in the middle of nowhere. And great guy, great experience. Highly recommend Vivation. This is actually Vivation influenced Language of Breath. Going back to the whole Wim Hof thing, everything that I teach was influenced by other people. I've just connected dots that maybe other people haven't connected yet, and added a lot of a framework so that you can easily apply these things to your clients. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here. If you're not in the Breath Club, now's the perfect time to sign up. For $5, you can join us for a deep breathwork session. $5. I mean, come on, and then that also sets you up for an entire month. You get access to my full catalog. There's over 100 sessions there that are pre-recorded. So lots of stuff for you to do, lots of stuff to enjoy. And then, of course, in about 10 minutes, if you join up now, you can join us on Zoom for our next breathwork session. So guys, thanks so much for being here. I will see you next time. If you haven't joined the Breath Club, now's the time. I'll see you guys next month.